Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're really cutting through the noise,
Mm-hmm.
getting you properly informed on something pretty vital for, well, any organization that wants to get better,
Right.
the Quality Maturity Matrix, or QMM.
Yeah, it sounds a bit technical maybe, but
Yeah.
its impact is actually really broad.
Holy.
It touches everything from, say, strategic planning right down to continuous improvement efforts in a business.
Exactly. So we've done the heavy lifting here. We've dived deep into a systematic literature review on this exact topic.
A proper academic look.
Yeah, analyzing how QMM is used, what challenges pop up, and what the research really tells us.
And our mission today, really, is to pull out the most important bits from that detailed review.
The key takeaways.
Exactly. Give you a crystal clear picture of what a QMM actually is, how it works out there in the real world, and maybe what its future looks like.
So if you've ever wondered how companies actually gauge their performance or, line up their processes with their big strategic goals, or even how they navigate massive changes like downsizing while trying to keep quality high.
Which is tough.
Definitely. Well, get ready because we are about to unpack this whole thing. Okay, so to lay the groundwork, let's start with the absolute basics. What exactly is a maturity matrix?
Okay, so a maturity matrix, or MM, at its core, it's basically a management tool. Think of it like a diagnostic.
Right.
It's designed to help an organization find its limitations, do a gap analysis, essentially.
Okay.
It helps line up processes with the strategic goals by giving you this sort of snapshot analysis of where the organization stands, its maturity level.
A snapshot. I like that.
Yeah, and you
Yep.
can use it across the whole company or just focus on, specific processes.
And then the quality maturity matrix, the QMM, that builds on that.
Yeah.
It's a specific kind of MM. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah, a QMM zooms right in on the organization's quality stuff. Tools, methods, the whole approach.
Got it.
It's used to benchmark, see where your current quality level is compared to where you want it to be.
Or maybe against competitors.
Or even against other companies, yeah. Often based on those big industry awards, benchmarking standards.
Like the Baldrige Award, maybe.
Exactly, like the Australian Quality Award, AQA, or the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, MBNQA, those kinds of things.
What's really interesting here, though, is that you said the general idea of an MM is common.
Yeah, pretty widespread.
But the literature specifically on QMM as a whole concept is, well, limited.
Surprisingly so, yeah. And there's this issue with consistent naming.
Right, you mentioned that, like quality management matrix.
Exactly. So sometimes people are talking about the same thing but using different terms. It feels like the field is still, settling on its language.
Interesting. So how are these MMs and QMMs actually used then, integrated?
Well, organizations often use them as a basis for policies, and sometimes, like we said, they structure them around those award guidelines.
Okay. Like the AQA or MBNQA criteria.
Exactly.
So those awards, like the AQA, I think it has, 7 categories? Leadership, strategy, info, people.
Yeah, customer focus, quality of process, product, service, organizational performance.
Yeah, that's right.
So those categories become a framework for self-assessment.
Precisely. Managers use them to kind of link where they are now, the status quo, to their strategic plans.
Helps them spot the weaknesses.
Spot weaknesses, figure out where to reallocate resources, that kind of thing.
And the MBNQA is similar, just maybe slightly different names for the categories.
Yeah, pretty similar structure. Like they might say customer and market focus instead of just customer focus. Subtle differences.
Okay.
But it raises that key question, doesn't it? How do companies actually put these tools into practice?
Right. The review highlights that if you pair an MM with continuous improvement, it creates this series of steps, like climbing a ladder towards new processing levels.
Iterative steps, yeah.
But, and this seems crucial, it needs that company-wide holistic commitment.
Absolutely. It can't just be one leader waving the flag.
That makes sense. And it's not always, straightforward. Managers might struggle with the actual doing of it. Developing a working MM.
How so?
Well, things like structuring the sessions, getting everyone to agree, consensus building,
Group dynamics.
handling group dynamics, fostering team learning. It's a process, which is why often having a facilitator is recommended, someone to guide it.
Okay. An objective guide.
Yeah. And even after you've got an improvement plan, keeping that commitment going is key.
Maintaining momentum.
Right. The research suggests having an anchor person.
An anchor person.
Yeah, someone whose job it is to manage the materials, deal with issues that crop up, make sure people are accountable.
That sounds practical.
And it's also noted that, once goals are met, the focus shifts. Continuous improvement is always looking forward. future-driven.
Okay, so this deep dive really shows just how versatile these maturity matrices can be. It's not just about quality, is it?
Not at all. Absolutely. The real significance of an MM is in deeply understanding your specific business environment.
Right.
And then using that matrix to add value through continuous improvement.
How else can they be used?
Well, for instance, you can use an MM to incorporate risk into your process analysis. There's specific methodologies for that, like the practical process profile.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, Franny. The review mentions instruments developed to measure the maturity of lean implementation, or even continuous improvement more broadly.
That's right. So managers aren't stuck with just one kind of EMA.
They can choose.
They can pick from many different varieties based on what they need right then, which, again, underlines why getting that nomenclature right,
The naming.
identifying the MM-specific direction, is so important for understanding its actual value.
Makes sense.
And for a QMM specifically, that versatility lets an organization use its current level of, say, Lean or Six Sigma or TQM.
Total quality management.
Right. Use that utilization level as a baseline.
To compare against.
Yeah, compare against other companies or against those industry award benchmarks like AQA and MBNQA.
So it helps managers redirect things.
Exactly. Redirect quality initiatives to improve those maturity levels and, crucially, align them with the big strategic goals.
Okay, so to understand all this, the paper we're digging into used a systematic literature review. That sounds pretty solid, methodologically speaking.
Oh, it is. Very robust. The review followed a really clear, transparent process. You could replicate it if you wanted to. It was based on a framework by Tranfield, Denyer, and Smart.
Okay. And it had stages.
3 main stages, yeah.
Stage 1 was planning the review. So setting goals, figuring out which databases to search, setting the search terms.
Yep. They looked specifically at things like conference papers, dissertations, journal articles, academic stuff.
But not newspaper articles or book reviews.
Right. Excluded those. And they focused on business and engineering fields.
And they limited it.
Critically, yeah. Focused on full-text, peer-reviewed articles, published in English.
Up to a certain date.
Up to March 1st, 2018, because they felt the topic was still relatively new back then.
Okay. Stage 2, conducting the review. This sounds like the actual searching part.
It is. That's where they hit the databases.
Yeah.
They started with the keyword quality maturity matrix.
They hadn't got nearly 9,500 results initially. Wow.
Yeah, quite a lot. But then, by using quotation marks, searching for that exact phrase,
Smart.
it narrowed it down dramatically. Just 6 articles popped up then.
6 from almost 9,500.
Yep. And after checking for duplicates or, very similar content, they ended up with 5 distinct articles to really analyze.
5 key papers.
All right.
Okay. And stage 3.
That was reporting and dissemination. Basically compiling everything, analyzing it, discussing the approaches, the results, the trends.
Looking for patterns.
Yeah, and reviewing the models described in those papers for any kind of predictive behaviors.
Got it. So the review then digs into those 5 specific articles. Let's start with the oldest one, Golden and Rollins from '97. What did they find?
Okay, so their study focused on quality costing tools, specifically the PAF model prevention appraisal failure and also process model. They found limitations with PAF, and the process model turned out to be pretty complex, led to some confusion.
Okay.
Ultimately, their conclusion was, well, these tools could identify areas for improvement,
Points away.
but they didn't automatically cause improvement, especially because commitment within the company was low.
Commitment again.
Yeah. And it suggests the QMM's use was kind of limited when the definitions kept shifting around dynamically.
More of a pointer than a driver in that case.
Okay.
Makes sense. What about Vanderveel and Brown? They did multiple studies, right?
They did. Vanderveel and Brown back in '99, they looked at self-assessment practices in Europe and Australia. They found that internal factors like wanting to improve from within were actually stronger motivators for companies to start self-assessment than external pressures.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about regulations or awards.
Less so than you might think. Yeah, more intrinsic motivation.
And they found different approaches to self-assessment.
Yeah, 3 main ways it contributed. Assessor-driven, management-driven, and employee-driven.
And which worked best?
Well, in Europe, the management-driven approach seemed to yield the best results for the organization.
Why was that?
Because it was linked directly to business planning. It had a clear four-step process, and it really involved management.
But employees were still involved.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Employee involvement was key for providing the data, the ground level view, and also for receiving training on it all.
Right. And they also look specifically at QMMs during downsizing. That sounds highly relevant.
Extremely relevant. That was a 1998 study. They looked at 4 Australian companies going through restructuring.
And what happened? Let's break those down.
Okay. Company A used a quality ladder based on the AQA framework. It was driven by a new CEO who really linked the matrix cells to strategic goals. Quality held up there.
Good sign. Company B.
Company B introduced TQM, Total Quality Management, but then they eliminated their quality section
Oh, dear.
and shifted the link away from quality in the strategic plan. Their quality levels dropped significantly.
Predictable, maybe. Company C.
Company C had strong CEO commitment. They adopted an AQA-based TQM model, really linked it to the corporate philosophy. Their QMM worked as both a planning and a measurement tool. They actually got recognized for excellence.
Shows what commitment can do. And Company D.
Company D also used an AQA-based program, linking quality activities through self-assessments. But during downsizing, the quality efforts became more localized, fragmented.
That's central.
Yeah, the QMM roadmap was used less for general quality, but they did still use it for specific areas like environmental and safety. Kind of a mixed bag.
So looking across those 4 cases, what's the big takeaway about QMM during downsizing?
Well, the studies pointed to 4 key factors really impacting quality in that situation.
Okay, what were they?
The emotional quality of the CEO, their commitment, their attitude, the rational quality of the management team, their planning, their execution, the systems infrastructure they had in place, and the human infrastructure, the people, their skills, their morale.
A mix of hard and soft factors.
Definitely. And a really consistent theme across all of them was how important it was to connect performance indicators and strategic goals back to the overall strategic plan. That linkage was vital.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, and the last study mentioned was Zhao, Young, and Li in 2004, looking at China's service sector.
That's right. Their study used the MBNQA criteria, surveyed medium to large companies, wholesale, retail, trade industries in China.
And they found different maturity levels.
Yeah, they identified 4 quality maturity clusters, ranging from undeveloped quality system, UQS, up to strategic quality system and soft quality system.
And what was the trend?
They found a consistent rise in quality levels across those clusters as the quality practices themselves improved.
Makes sense.
And they concluded something quite interesting, that it's not necessarily essential for a company to be brilliant in every single area of quality management to achieve good performance overall.
Focus might be okay.
Seems like it, yeah. But what was really unique about their findings, unlike the other studies that mostly focused on, where are we now and where are we going?
Right. Current position and forward steps.
Zhao and colleagues offered this different perspective. They allowed a company to see itself in the matrix and analyze where it came from.
Look backwards.
Yeah, look at its lower levels of maturity. Offered a view of their past journey, not just the future.
That is a unique angle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so pulling all this together now, looking across all these studies, what are the main overarching findings from this whole systematic review?
Well, first off, it really confirmed that there's a very limited number of truly relevant academic articles specifically on QMM. It's a clear research gap.
Despite its apparent usefulness.
Right. But even with that limited pool, it's still clearly identified that there is value in using QMM on various levels within an organization.
And it backed up that point from Golden and Rollins, didn't it? That using a QMM just to identify quality costs.
Yeah, that specific use case.
Offered limited value for actually developing the QMM itself. More diagnostic than developmental in that context.
Exactly. And connecting back to that downsizing study, which was really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The review strongly supported the idea that the QMM's value during restructuring was heavily dependent on the CEO's commitment to TQM.
Leadership again?
Absolutely. CEOs who really embraced both TQM and a QMM found high value in using it to set up improvement processes.
And even if the CEO wasn't fully on board.
Even then, an uncommitted CEO could still use parts of a QMM as a kind of guideline, so still some utility, but less impactful.
It really just drives home that human element in strategy implementation, doesn't it?
It really does. And of course, that unique finding from Zhao et al. stood out.
The looking back part.
Yeah, allowing companies to understand their past maturity levels. That's not something you see in every framework. Adds a layer of depth.
So given all that, what does this review suggest for the future of research on QMM? Where should studies go next?
Well, a really critical point is that the most recent article they reviewed was from 2004.
Right, that's quite a while ago now.
It is. So at the time they did their review in 2018, there was basically no discernible current trend in QMM use that they could identify from the literature.
Which explains why.
Which explains why all the authors they cited consistently called for more research. Everyone saw the need.
And where should that research focus? Here's where it gets really interesting for future work.
Well, number one, develop and align a consistent definition and nomenclature for QMM.
Address that naming problem we talked about at the start.
Exactly. Get everyone speaking the same language. That's foundational for building knowledge.
Makes sense. What else?
Also, future research really needs to move beyond these relatively small or highly targeted samples.
Broaden the scope.
Yeah. It needs to include organizations that are maybe less experienced with self-assessment or quality practices generally.
Why?
To get a better grip on the real-world implementation side of things, the challenges, the successes in different contexts.
And maybe look wider geographically.
Definitely. A broader, more global sample would be fantastic for looking at international trends and how QMM is applied differently around the world.
So it sounds like the review, while highlighting what we do know, also really puts a spotlight on the significant gaps that still exist.
Yeah, absolutely. It points the way forward by showing where the holes are.
Did the reviewers acknowledge limitations in their own work?
Oh, yes, they did. They were clear about potentially missing relevant papers, maybe stuff not indexed in the databases they used, or gray literature.
Like internal company reports or something?
Could be, yeah. Things not formally published, and especially articles in languages other than English since they limited their search.
So potential blind spots.
For sure. But the main goal, the intent of doing this systematic review, was really to act as a springboard.
A catalyst.
Exactly, to push for more research into how organizations can actually implement QMMs effectively, to drive that continuous improvement and, ultimately boost their overall organizational health.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us, and hopefully you listening, a much clearer picture of the quality maturity matrix. Not just the definition, but how it's been studied, how it's used, its strengths, and, yeah, its limitations too.
It really does seem like a powerful tool for seeing where you are,
Right.
where you want to get to, and maybe even appreciating how far you've already come, that Zhao et al. Point.
Looking back, yeah.
Indeed. And if you connect it all to the bigger picture, it just underlines how crucial that fundamental understanding and commitment are.
Especially from the top.
Especially from leadership, yeah. For any strategic tool, really, to actually deliver value. Without that, even the best matrix.
Just sits on a shelf?
Pretty much. It can become just another framework, another tick box exercise.
So what does all this mean for you listening right now? Well, maybe the next time you're thinking about your own team, your organization, ask yourself, how much do we really know internally about our current capabilities? Where are we truly at?
Good question.
And how could a structured approach, like a maturity matrix, help you not just find those gaps, but also, maybe importantly, acknowledge the journey you've already been on? Recognize the progress.
That's a great point, celebrating the wins along the way.
Exactly. Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.